The air in a $40 a night motel room has a specific density. It is heavy with the smell of stale cigarette smoke that has seeped into the drywall, industrial lemon cleaner that fails to mask the mildew, and the silent, suffocating weight of transient despair. I sat on the edge of the mattress, which dipped aggressively in the center like a hammock. The bedspread was a patterned polyester nightmare of oranges and browns, designed to hide stains, but I could still map the geography of other people's misery on the fabric. I am Arthur Vance. For 40 years, I was a name that opened doors. I was the CEO of Vance Logistics. I moved freight across oceans. I signed contracts that reshaped the skylines of port cities. I drank scotch that was older than the maid currently banging her cart against the wall in the hallway outside. But today, to the world, and more importantly to the people I shared my blood and my life with, I am a ruin. I am a cautionary tale. I am the old man who lost his touch, made bad bets, and watched his empire crumble into dust. They don't know that I pulled the demolition lever myself. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. It was partially an act, an affectation I had adopted to sell the narrative of the frail, broken patriarch. But in this dim light, with the neon sign of the vacancy buzzing outside the window, the tremor felt real. It was the vibration of a man standing on a ledge, waiting to see who would catch him and who would push. I had liquidated everything. The offshore trusts were sealed tight, invisible to anyone without the encryption keys I kept memorized. The mansion was sold to a shell company I controlled. The cars were in storage. I had stripped myself bare, presenting a carcass to the vultures to see who would try to feed and who would try to heal. It had been 3 weeks. The silence from my circle was deafening. I picked up the phone. It wasn't my usual encrypted smartphone. It was a burner, a cheap piece of plastic I had bought at a gas station. I dialed the number I had known by heart since 1968. Roger. Roger was my brother in everything but blood. We had huddled together in foxholes in the Mekong Delta, sharing a single can of peaches while the jungle rained fire around us. I had carried him to the evac chopper when he took shrapnel in the leg. When we came home, I paid for his first house. When his daughter got hooked on opioids, I paid for the rehab 3 times until it stuck.
I had let him live in my guest house. I had let him captain my boat. If anyone would stand by me in the mud, it was Roger. I pressed the phone to my ear. It rang. Once. Twice. "Voicemail box," the automated voice said. I took a breath. I summoned the fear I had felt in Vietnam, the cold knot in my stomach when the ammo ran low. "Roger," I said, letting my voice crack. "It's Arthur. Pick up, please. It's gone, Raj. The IRS froze the last account this morning. They took the pension. They took the house keys." I paused, letting a sob hitch in my throat. It wasn't hard. The loneliness of this room made it easy to access the grief. "I'm at the Motel 6 off the interstate," I whispered. "I don't have anywhere else to go. I just need a place to crash for a week, just until I get the paperwork sorted. I'm scared, Roger. I'm really scared. Please." I hung up. I stared at the phone. I waited. 10 minutes passed. The maid's cart rattled further down the hall. A siren wailed in the distance, a lonely, ascending cry. He was probably in the shower, or maybe he was in the yard. He would call back. He had to. We were blood. We were the last survivors of Platoon 4. I picked up the phone again. I needed to hear his voice. I needed him to tell me he was coming. I dialed. Ring. No, not a ring. It was a click, followed by 3 sharp descending tones. Doot, doot, do. Then, a recorded voice, not the voicemail, a different voice, cold, robotic, final. "The customer you are calling is not accepting calls from this number." I froze. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it as if it had bitten me. I dialed again. My fingers mashed the keypad. Doot, doot, do. He hadn't just ignored me. He hadn't just let it go to voicemail. He had blocked me. He had listened to my plea, listened to his brother beg for a roof over his head, and he had pressed a button to erase me from his life. The betrayal hit me physically. It was sharper than the shrapnel that had taken Roger's leg. It was a knife twisting in the space between my ribs. 40 years of dinners, of secrets, of shared trauma, 40 years of my money propping up his life. And it was worth less than a week on a couch. I felt a surge of nausea. I scrambled for the other phone, the smartphone I kept hidden in the lining of my suitcase, the one connected to the real world. I logged into Instagram. I created a dummy account weeks ago to monitor them. I searched for Roger's handle, Raj the Dodger.
There was a new post, uploaded 12 minutes ago. It was a photo of Roger. He was holding a cigar, grinning at the camera, his face tanned and leathery. He was wearing a captain's hat. He was sitting on the deck of the Kestrel, my boat. The boat I let him use because he said the sea air helped his PTSD. The boat I paid the docking fees for. The boat I paid the fuel for. The caption read, "Living the good life. No worries, no drama." He wasn't busy. He wasn't in the shower. He was sitting on my property, smoking a cigar I probably paid for, celebrating the fact that the dead weight of Arthur Vance had finally been cut loose. I sat in that motel room, the silence of the blocked call deafening in my ears, realizing that 40 years of brotherhood was worth less than a week on a couch. He thought I was trash to be taken out. He didn't know I was the one holding the deed to his life. If you've ever discovered that your circle is full of snakes, if you've ever felt the cold shock of realizing you were just a wallet with a heartbeat to the people you loved, listen to me. Don't let them break you. Don't let them see you bleed. Hit subscribe. You need to see what I did with the ticket I bought at the gas station, because luck is a funny thing. Sometimes it waits until you have nothing left to lose before it strikes. I put the phone down. I walked into the bathroom. The mirror was cracked in the corner. I looked at my reflection. Gray stubble, red-rimmed eyes, a stained t-shirt. I looked like a bum. I looked like exactly what they wanted me to be. "Okay, Roger," I whispered to the glass. The fallout over the next week was a slow, grinding brutality. I maintained the charade. I sent texts to my children. To Emily, daughter, "Honey, I need help with groceries. The card was declined." From Emily, "Dad, I can't right now. Tim's tuition is due. Maybe ask the county for assistance?" The county. My daughter, whose mortgage I paid off 3 years ago, was telling me to go to the welfare office. To David, son, "David, they're going to kick me out of the motel. Can I stay in the guest room, just for a few nights?" From David, read 4:15 p.m. No response. Just the digital confirmation that he had seen my desperation and chosen to look away. I walked past the country club on Tuesday. I was wearing a worn coat I had bought at a thrift store. I saw my old golf partners, men I had done deals with for decades. They saw me. I saw them see me. They turned their backs. They became intensely interested in their putters. I was a contagion. I was poverty, and poverty is infectious in their world. By Tuesday night, the loneliness was a physical weight. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the silence. I sat in the motel room, eating a cup of instant noodles made with tap water, listening to the couple next door arguing about drug money. I felt hollowed out. I had proven my point. I had tested the structural integrity of my life, and the whole damn thing had collapsed. I was rich, yes. I had millions in the Cayman Trust, but I was bankrupt in every way that mattered. I needed air. I walked to the gas station on the corner. The fluorescent lights hummed, buzzing like angry hornets. The clerk was behind bulletproof glass. He didn't look at me. He was watching a soccer game on his phone. I bought a frozen dinner, Salisbury steak. It cost $4. I looked at the counter. There was a plastic display of lottery tickets. The Powerball jackpot was flashing on a digital sign. 80 million. It was a meaningless gesture, a habit from a lifetime ago, back when I was poor in the 70s, back when $1 and a dream were all I had. "Give me a quick pick," I said, sliding a crumpled $5 bill through the slot. The clerk grunted. The machine whirred. A slip of paper printed out. I shoved it into my pocket next to my burner phone. I didn't look at the numbers. I didn't care. I walked back to the motel in the rain. I ate the Salisbury steak cold because the microwave in the room was broken. I fell asleep to the sound of sirens, dreaming of the jungle and the friend who had left me there. The next morning, I woke up to the sun glaring through the thin curtains. I felt heavy. I didn't want to gap. I didn't want to play the game anymore. I wanted to call the lawyers, dissolve the trusts, reveal the truth, and scream at them. But I needed coffee. I walked to the lobby. There was a TV mounted on the wall, playing the local news. The volume was low. I poured a cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. I glanced up at the screen. The news anchor was smiling. And finally, check your tickets, folks. I froze. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. 4th and Main. That was the gas station I went to last night. I reached into my pocket. The ticket was crumpled, warm from my body heat. I smoothed it out on the laminate counter of the lobby. The numbers on the screen flashed up. 04, 12, 28, 35, 42, Powerball, 09. I looked at the ticket. My breath hitched. The world narrowed down to that small slip of thermal paper. I checked it again and again. I had won $80 million. I started to laugh. It wasn't a joyous laugh. It wasn't the laugh of a man who has just been saved. It was a dark, guttural sound that tore its way out of my chest. It started as a chuckle and grew into a heave, shaking my shoulders until tears streamed down my face. The clerk behind the desk looked at me with alarm, reaching for the phone, probably thinking the old bum finally snapped. I sank onto the lobby sofa, clutching the ticket. The irony tasted like blood in my mouth. I had faked being broke to test my loyalty. I had found that I had absolutely none. I had found that my worth to the people I loved was exactly $0. And then, the universe, in its twisted, dark sense of humor, had handed me the GDP of a small nation. I wasn't just rich anymore. I wasn't just wealthy. I was a god of vengeance. I had $70 million hidden in offshore accounts. And now, I had another $80 million that was completely public, clean, taxable, visible. I stopped laughing. I wiped my eyes with the back of my dirty hand. I didn't cash the ticket immediately. I folded it carefully. I opened the Gideon Bible that was sitting on the lobby table and placed the ticket inside, marking the page at Psalm 94. O Lord God, to whom vengeance belongeth. I walked back to my room. I picked up the burner phone. I dialed a number. Stone, I said when the voice answered. Stone was my personal attorney. He was the only one in on the ruse. He was the one managing the shell companies. He was the only man who knew I wasn't actually destitute. Stone asked. Are you okay? Do you want to end it? No, I whispered. Why? You've seen enough, haven't you? They all failed to test Arthur. Roger, the kids. Yes, I said. They think I'm dead in the water, Stone. So come back, Stone said. Reveal the assets. I will, I said. I looked at the Bible on the nightstand where I had transferred the ticket. Stone, I said, my voice hardening into steel. A liquidation auction, I said. 2 weeks from now. Tell them the bank is seizing everything I have left. My vintage watches, my late wife's jewelry, the last scraps of my dignity. Because vultures can't resist a carcass, I said. I know Roger will come. He's a scavenger. He'll want to pick the bones of the man he discarded.
I want him there. Let's invite them to the funeral, I whispered. I hung up the phone. I sat on the lumpy bed in the dark room. I was alone. I was unloved. But I was armed, and war had just been declared. Revenge is not a scream, it is a calculation. It is the precise application of pressure to a fracture until the entire structure gives way. 2 weeks had passed since I won the lottery.
2 weeks since I had held the ticket that changed my life, not because of the money, but because of the power it gave me to reveal the truth. I had spent those 14 days in the shadows, orchestrating the final act of my own demise. Stone, my lawyer, had been brilliant. He had leased a warehouse in the industrial district, a cavernous space of concrete and steel that smelled of dust and echoes. He had sent out the invitations. Liquidation auction, the estate of Arthur Vance. Everything must go. I arrived early on the day of the auction. The sky was gray, weeping a slow, persistent drizzle that matched the grim nature of the event. I wasn't wearing my usual tailored suits. I wore a tattered wool coat I had bought at a second-hand store for $10. My shoes were scuffed. I hadn't shaved in 3 days. I looked every day of my 74 years, worn down by failure and abandonment. I slipped in through the back door, unnoticed by the catering staff setting up the cheap coffee and stale donuts. I found a seat in the back row, tucked away in the shadows of a structural pillar. From here, I could see everything. I could see the podium where the auctioneer would stand. I could see the display cases lined with the remnants of my life, my watch collection, the silver tea set Martha had loved, the cufflinks I wore to my daughter's wedding. And I could see the door where the vultures would enter. By 10 a.m., the warehouse began to fill. My children arrived first. Emily and David walked in together, heads down, looking annoyed rather than grief-stricken. Emily was checking her phone, complaining about the dampness of the warehouse. David was scanning the room, looking for anything valuable he might have missed when he looted my study months ago. "I can't believe this is it," David muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "This is all that's left?" "He squandered it," Emily sighed, shaking her head. "He lost his mind, and then he lost the money." I gripped the arms of my folding chair. My own children.
They weren't mourning the loss of their father's dignity. They were mourning the diminution of their inheritance. Then he walked in. Roger. He wasn't alone. He was with a mutual acquaintance, a man named Carl who I had played golf with for 20 years. Roger was laughing. He wore a windbreaker and a baseball cap, looking relaxed, looking healthy. He didn't look like a man whose best friend was destitute. He looked like a man who had shed a heavy burden. "Poor old Arthur," Roger said, clapping Carl on the back. "Always was a bit soft in the head when it came to money. Bad investments." "It's a shame," Carl agreed, eyeing the display cases. "Exactly," Roger chuckled. "I've had my eye on that Patek Philippe for years. Arthur promised it to me, you know. Said he'd leave it to me in his will. But since there won't be a will..." I watched him. I watched the man I had pulled out of a burning jungle, the man whose mortgage I had paid, the man I had loved like a brother. He was a scavenger. He was picking through the wreckage of my life, looking for shiny things to take home to his nest. The auctioneer stepped up to the podium. He tapped the microphone. The sound boomed through the warehouse. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the liquidation auction of the assets of Arthur Vance. All items are sold as is. All sales are final." An assistant held up the watch. It gleamed in the harsh overhead lights. It was gold, engraved on the back with my grandfather's initials. It was the watch I had carried in my pocket every day for 50 years. "Bidding starts at $500, the auctioneer announced. "600, Roger shouted immediately, raising his paddle. He was grinning. "Do I hear 6? 600, a stranger in the front row called. 700, Roger countered aggressively. 700 going once? Roger, yelled. "Come on, let me have it." He laughed as he said it. Sentimental value. He was buying my grandfather's legacy for the price of a used television. 700, the auctioneer slammed his gavel. Roger walked up to the clerk's table. He pulled out a wad of cash he probably earned from a job I got him. He took the watch. He held it up to the light, admiring it. He didn't look sad. He looked triumphant. I stood up. My knees popped. My back ached, but my resolve was iron. I walked toward the side door. I signaled Stone, who was standing by the entrance in a sharp black suit. Stone nodded. He pressed a button on his phone.
The heavy metal doors of the warehouse groaned and began to roll down, sealing the exits. The crowd murmured, confused. Then, the side doors burst open. 6 men stepped in. They weren't mall cops. They were private security, dressed in tactical black, armed with sidearms. They moved with military precision, lining the walls, blocking the exits. The room went silent. The murmuring stopped. Fear, sharp and sudden, spiked in the air. Stone walked to the podium. He took the microphone from the confused auctioneer. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stone said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Roger," shouted, clutching the watch, "I just bought this." "The owner," Stone continued, ignoring him, "has retained the assets." Roger yelled, turning to face the crowd. Rallying them to his indignation, "He's living in a Motel 6. He can't retain anything. I paid for this watch." "It is not yours," I said. My voice wasn't amplified by a microphone, but it carried. It cut through the warehouse like a blade. Heads turned. 300 people spun around to look at the back of the room. I stepped out of the shadows. I reached up and unbuttoned the tattered wool coat. I let it slide off my shoulders. It fell to the concrete floor in a heap of gray rags. Underneath, I was wearing a bespoke Italian suit. Charcoal gray. Silk tie. The fabric shimmered under the warehouse lights. It fit me perfectly, tailored to the millimeter. I straightened my cuffs. I picked up my ebony cane, not because I needed it, but because it was a scepter. I walked down the center aisle. Click, click, click. The sound of the cane on the concrete was rhythmic, steady, ominous. The crowd parted. My children, Emily and David, stared at me with their mouths open. They looked at the suit. They looked at the shoes. They looked at the man they thought was destitute, now walking with the power of a king returning to his throne. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes locked on Roger. He stood by the clerk's table, the watch clutched in his hand. His face went pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I stopped in front of him. I was close enough to smell the stale cocktail his breath, close enough to see the dilated pupils of his eyes. "You blocked my number, Roger," I said quietly. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone was listening. "Arthur," Roger stammered. He tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. "Arthur, hi. My phone was acting up. The service out on the water."
You know how it is. I didn't get the message until later. I was gonna call you back. "You blocked me," I repeated. "I called you from a motel room, begging for help, begging for a roof over my head." No, it was a mistake. I would never." "I won the lottery, Roger," I said. My voice projected to the rafters. I wanted the people in the back row to hear it. I wanted the dust motes floating in the air to vibrate with it. $80 million, I said. The Powerball. A gasp ripped through the room. It was a physical sound, a collective intake of breath. Roger's face turned the color of ash. He stared at me. He stared at the suit. He did the math. 80? He whispered. On top of the fortune I never actually lost, I added. I looked at my children. Emily took a step toward me, a desperate, fawning smile plastering itself onto her face. "Dad, oh my God, we were so worried." "Stay back," I said, not even turning my head. One of the security guards stepped in front of her, blocking her path. She stopped, stunned. I turned back to Roger. "I faked my ruin," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I liquidated everything. I moved into a rat-infested motel. I wore these rags." I leaned in closer. "You didn't just let me get wet, Roger. You locked the door." "Arthur, please," Roger begged, reaching out a hand. "We're brothers. Vietnam, remember? I was scared. I didn't know what to do. There is nothing to explain," I said. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a document. It was a single sheet of paper, folded once. I unfolded it. Roger's eyes went wide. That was his house, the house he lived in, the house I owned, the house I had let him live in rent-free for 10 years because I wanted him to be comfortable. "You told everyone it was yours," I said. "You told people you bought it with your investments, but we both know the truth." I handed him the paper. "This is an eviction notice," I said. "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Roger crumbled.
It was a physical collapse. His shoulders slumped, his knees bent. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He dropped the watch on the table. He grabbed my arm. "Arthur, no, you can't. Where will I go? I have nowhere. We serve together." I roared, pulling my arm away. "I paid your debts. I paid your mortgage. I paid for your daughter's rehab. I carried you, Roger." He was crying now, real tears.
Tears of a man who realizes he has thrown away a diamond because he thought it was glass. "Please," he sobbed. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had been my best friend. I searched my heart for pity. I searched for the old affection. I found nothing. The grief had burned away in that motel room, leaving only ash and clarity. I reached out and picked up the pocket watch from the table. It felt warm in my hand, solid, real. "This was for family," I whispered, rubbing my thumb over the engraving. "I was going to leave it to you." I put the watch in my pocket. "But I don't have any family here," I said. I turned away. I walked away from him. "Gay!" he screamed. I didn't stop. I walked down the aisle, past my stunned children, past the gaping neighbors, past the auctioneer who stood frozen at the podium. The security guards fell in behind me, a phalanx of black suits protecting me from the parasites. I walked out of the warehouse. The rain had stopped. The air was cool and clean. A black limousine was waiting at the curb, its engine idling, its windows tinted dark. The driver opened the door. I slid into the leather seat. It smelled of new car and solitude. I looked out the window. Through the tinted glass, I could see back into the warehouse. The guards were ushering people out. But Roger was still standing there, alone in the empty center aisle. He looked small. He looked broken. He was holding the eviction notice in his hand, staring at the door I had just walked through. I watched him for a long moment. I felt a pang of sadness, a ghost pain for the friendship that had died. But it passed quickly, replaced by the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. I was alone, yes. I had no wife, no children I could trust, no best friend. But I was clean. I had purged the rot. I had cut away the dead weight that had been dragging me down. "Where to, mister?" the driver asked. "The airport," I said. "I have a plane to catch." And then, the car pulled away from the curb. The warehouse faded into the distance. I reached into my pocket and touched the watch. It ticked against my finger, a steady, reliable sound. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel poor. I didn't feel broken. I sat back in the seat, watching the city slide by. I finally felt rich.